Hey everyone, this video will be my His Dark Materials Season 2 Episode 4 review. And I must say, this episode was one of my favourites. It was action-packed, but it's not dumb action, not dumb CGI. This episode was full of character and story. As always, just be careful for spoilers from this episode and everything that's came before. So before we begin, I would just like to apologise for the delay. Usually I get these videos out on Sunday night, but I've been unwell for the last few days. But there's a lot to talk about, so let's get to it. So the episode starts off with a quick history of the subtle knife. Basically, it's a knife with two sides. One side can cut any material, and it's quite similar from the material from Bolvanga that was used to separate the demons from the kids. And the other side of the knife can cut windows into new worlds. It was created by a guild of scholars, and the knife was intended to be used for good, but the scholars used it for greed, to benefit themselves, to gain power and wealth. And opening more and more windows to other worlds allowed the spectres to come to Cittàgazze. It reveals that Azrael's window has allowed more and more spectres to enter Cittàgazze. All this comes from the opening, and from later when Giacomo explains to Will the history of the knife. And I must say I like this. Explains the knife well, and gives you more information on the spectres. The person that wields the knife is called the Bearer, and Will is taking up the mantle. And this part, and probably the next few episodes, are my favourite part of the story from the subtle knife. I was very impressed with the fight between Will and Angelico's brother, and the training with Giacomo. And I think we all got a bit excited when Pan allowed Will to touch him. And remember, in Lyra's world, you're not supposed to touch anyone's demon. And this is a pretty big deal. The Will and Lyra scenes this episode were full of story progression, filled in with the action scenes. There was so much character development for them. Their relationship was really enhanced. I'm starting to believe it now. Remember, by the end of the episode, Will's hurt from his fight. Remember, he had 2 of his fingers cut off, but they need to get the alethiometer back. But obviously they can't trade the knife for that, as Will has been chosen to be the Bearer. So this is all setting up the next episode and what's to come, and I'm so excited for it. Because like I said, it's my favourite part of the story. So Will and Lyra is the big part of the episode this week with the knife, but Andrew Scott makes his appearance as Stanislav's groomman, or Joe Parry. Lee's found him, and it's revealed that Stanislav's groomman is actually a shaman in Lyra's world. But he's not from there. He's actually from Will's world. And even though I don't think it's been outright said in words yet, but it's pretty obvious, and the show has made it very clear, he's Will's dad, John Parry. We saw photos of him in the first season, and it basically said in the episode that he lost his son because he left this world. He left them behind. And then the scene goes straight to Will. It's obvious. But I do apologise if I spoiled that. But I'm 99.9% sure that's not a spoiler. If you go back and watch the episode, it's all there. It's pretty obvious. So yeah, that's John Parry, that's Will's dad. And I love this story. I love the fact that Lee wants to protect Lyra, John wants to find the bearer of the subtle knife, and the fact that his son is the bearer and Lyra's with him. I love how the audience know all about this, but the characters don't. Don't get me wrong, I love massive twists and turns like that. Massive shocks when characters and the audience don't know what's going on. But I also like when the audience know, but the characters don't. I love seeing the characters figure it out and watching the story progress. I know a lot of people watching this are fans of Andrew Scott. I think he was in the Sherlock series. And I must say, I enjoyed him this episode. I don't think we've seen enough of him to make a final judgment, but it's a safe bet we're all going to be happy, as he's a great actor. And from what we've seen so far, I like it. So I'm going to say it again, this episode is full of massive moments. Will's got the knife now, we've met his dad, but also Mary Malone communicates with angels using the cave. We learn more about dust, about shadow particles and dark matter. Back in episode 2 they explained it, and I understand that it could have been pretty boring for people that are not invested in the story or haven't read the books. You know, you've got this story about demons, about armoured bears, about Lyra Silvertongue trying to save her friends. And then you move into other worlds. And then the story pulls out science, about dark matter, about shadow particles. But the more and more that's been revealed, the more exciting it gets. Especially when you have a voice that's declared itself as an angel and said that it's intervened with humans all along, and they've done it for vengeance. This episode did reveal a lot, but it's also set up new mysteries. A lot of new elements were added in this episode. It could have become very messy, but they handled it very well. Very happy, very impressed. So let's talk about Lord Boreal, also known as Carlo or Sir Charles Lantrum, whatever he calls himself. He's probably the most least likeable character on the show. But that's good, that's what he's meant to be. The way he talked down to Mary with that woman remark, and the way he acts around Mrs. Coulter. Yep, nobody likes Carlo. I don't like the character, and we're not meant to, but I like the performance. But I will admit, I'm confused about one thing. Not exactly confused, just a bit unsure why they've done it. Lord Boreal takes Mrs. Coulter into Cittàgazze to get to Will's Oxford. They hurry through the world to avoid the spectres, and Mrs. Coulter does get a glimpse of them, and remember that for future episodes. But I'm sure in the books Lord Boreal used to go through Cittàgazze before Lord Asriel's window was created. That changed the windows. It altered them. It meant that Lord Boreal's window didn't have to go through Cittàgazze, it went straight to Will's Oxford. But the show's done it differently. I don't remember seeing Lord Boreal in the show ever going through Cittàgazze. I'm sure he used to go straight into Will's world, from his. I might be wrong on that one, and I haven't rewatched season 1 in a while, but I'm sure he just goes straight into Will's world. Whereas in this episode, he has to go through Cittàgazze. It is right that Mrs. Coulter does go to Will's Oxford, but I'm sure in the book she goes straight there. She doesn't have to go for Cittàgazze. Not exactly sure why they've done this, probably just to show more of the Spectre threat, and to set up Mrs. Coulter being there for later episodes. And speaking of the Spectres, they finally caught up with Angelica's brother, who was no longer protected by the Salt Knife. Or Giacomo, who was no longer protected by the knife because it was in the Tower of the Angels. The Spectres really haven't had their moment yet. They have been seen before and they were mentioned several times. For instance, Will was being followed by one earlier. I think that was in the very first episode in the big, ending scene. Which meant nothing because that scene was completely brushed over. In the next scene in episode 2, it was morning. There was no payoff for that scene. But the Spectres got a lot of development here, a lot of backstory, and we've seen them at work. We've seen what they do to adults. Even though their design has been changed quite a lot from the books, I'm sure in the books they're kind of like transparent beings. They're kind of like blobs, white blobs, see-through, clear blobs. Whereas in the show they kind of look like Dementors from Harry Potter. Obviously not everything that works on page works on screen. Sometimes things have to be changed, but I like it. I like the design of the Spectres. Makes them pretty creepy, makes them pretty threatening. Kind of got that horror vibe to it. And speaking of action scenes, I did forget the witches got their payback on the Magisterium in a very quick scene where they destroyed the ships guarding Asriel's window. So they're going into Cittàgazze, they're going to go find Lyra. And Rutascadi is going to go find Lord Asriel. So yeah, overall, probably my favourite episode so far, maybe alongside the season 1 finale. A lot happened, Will's got the knife now, angels have been mentioned, Mrs. Coulter's in Cittàgazze, and Lee's met up with John Parry. I think this episode had the perfect balance between character, story, and action. Sometimes when they do action scenes, character and story can suffer. Sometimes when they do an episode full of exposition and story, sometimes the action can suffer. So yeah, great episode, very hyped, very excited. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more, make sure you subscribe, and while you wait, here's some more videos. I'll see you in the next one.